Did you enjoy the college fund we set aside for you, Mom? My son asked, leaning back in his chair like he'd just given me something to be grateful for. I remember blinking at him, slow, confused, like my mind needed an extra second to catch up. What fund? I said, my voice quieter than I expected. For a moment, no one spoke. The kind of silence that doesn't feel empty, but heavy. I looked at him, really looked, trying to understand if this was some kind of misunderstanding, some joke I wasn't in on. But Daniel wasn't smiling anymore. His eyes flickered, just slightly, toward Rebecca. She was standing by the kitchen counter, holding a wine glass too tightly, her knuckles pale against the stem. The college fund, Mom, he repeated, slower this time. The one we gave you. 12 years ago. 12 years ago. I felt that number settle somewhere deep in my chest. 12 years ago, I was working 2 jobs. Cleaning offices in the mornings, folding clothes at a department store in the evenings. My back ached constantly back then. Still does, if I'm honest. I remember counting quarters at the kitchen table to make sure I could cover my electric bill. I remember stretching a single pot of soup across 4 days. I remember skipping my blood pressure medication more times than I'd ever admit out loud. If there had been a college fund, any kind of money with my name on it, I would have known. I would have felt it. Daniel, I said carefully, folding my hands in my lap so he wouldn't see them shake. I never received anything like that. He frowned, the kind he used when something didn't make sense in his business meetings. That's not possible, he said. I handled it myself. There were transfers. Paperwork. I made sure it was taken care of. Behind him, Rebecca shifted. Just a small movement, but enough to catch my eye. She turned slightly, as if looking for something on the counter that wasn't there. Her smile, polished, practiced, didn't quite reach her eyes anymore. I had seen that look before. Not once. Not twice. Enough times that it sat in the back of my memory like a puzzle piece I never quite placed. Show me, I said. The words surprised even me. Calm. Steady. Not accusing. Just certain. Daniel nodded quickly, already reaching for his phone, his confidence returning as he scrolled through old emails and bank confirmations. It's all here, he said. Every transfer. Every document. I watched his face as he read. Watched the certainty shift into something else. Something tighter. That's strange, he muttered. I didn't move. Didn't speak. I had spent a lifetime reacting too quickly, smoothing things over, giving people the benefit of the doubt. Not this time. This time I waited. The account, he said slowly, turning the screen toward himself again. It wasn't yours. I felt something inside me go still. Not break. Not shatter. Just settle. Like a door quietly closing. Then whose was it? I asked. He hesitated. Just for a second. But it was enough. Enough for me to know that whatever answer came next would explain far more than just missing money. I did not ask him to say the name out loud. I did not need to. The hesitation in his voice had already told me enough. I had seen that pause before, years ago, in smaller moments that never felt important at the time. Now they lined up in my mind, one after another, like stepping stones leading to something I had been too trusting to see. Daniel cleared his throat and looked back at his phone, as if reading it again might change what was written there. It was transferred to a managed account, he said finally. A family account. I tilted my head slightly. Whose family? He did not answer right away. Instead, he glanced toward Rebecca again. This time, she did not look away. She just stood there, perfectly still, her expression carefully blank, like someone who had practiced holding a mask in place. I felt a quiet shift inside me. Not anger. Not yet. Just clarity. Daniel, I said, keeping my voice even. You told me you set that money aside for me. You told me it was for my future. He nodded quickly. It was. It is. I mean, it should have been. Should have been. The words echoed in the space between us. I folded my hands together tighter, feeling the familiar ache in my knuckles. For years, I had told myself that my life turned out the way it did because of circumstance. Bad timing. Bad luck. A few wrong turns that added up over time. I never once considered that something meant for me had been quietly redirected somewhere else. 12 years ago, I remember the winter being especially harsh. The kind that seeps into your bones and stays there. My heater had broken in January, and I could not afford to fix it right away. I slept in the living room for 2 weeks because it was the smallest space to keep warm. I wore 2 sweaters and a coat inside my own home. I remember laughing it off when Daniel called. Told him everything was fine. Told him I liked the cold. I did not want to be a burden. I never wanted to be that kind of mother. And all that time, somewhere, there was money. Enough to change everything. Enough to make those nights easier. Enough to remind me that I was not alone. Show me the account, I said. My voice did not shake this time. Daniel hesitated, then turned the phone toward me. Numbers. Dates. Transfers. I did not understand all the details, but I understood enough. The name attached to the account sat there, clear and undeniable. Ethan Parker. My sister's son. I stared at it for a long second, letting the weight of it settle. Ethan, who had gone to a private college. Ethan, who drove a new car before he turned 21. Ethan, who always seemed to have opportunities that others did not. I had always thought he was just lucky. I let out a slow breath and leaned back in my chair. Across the room, Rebecca finally moved, setting her glass down with a soft clink against the counter. There must be some kind of mistake, she said, her voice smooth, controlled. I looked at her then, really looked, and for the first time, I did not see a daughter-in-law trying to keep peace in the family. I saw someone who had been very careful, very patient, and very, very deliberate. No, I said quietly. I do not think this is a mistake at all. I did not raise my voice. I did not accuse anyone. I simply sat there, letting the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable for everyone except me. Daniel kept staring at his phone as if the numbers might rearrange themselves into something easier to explain, something that would not make him question the last 12 years of his own decisions. Rebecca, on the other hand, recovered faster. She always did. We should not jump to conclusions, she said, her tone light but firm, the same tone she used at family gatherings when she wanted to steer conversations away from anything inconvenient. There could have been a mix-up with the accounts. These things happen all the time. I almost smiled at that. All the time. I wondered how many times something like this had happened without me noticing. How many little decisions had been made in rooms I was not invited into. How many times my name had been used while my voice was not. Daniel, I said, not taking my eyes off her. When you set this up, who helped you? He hesitated again, and this time the answer came quicker, as if it had been sitting just beneath the surface all along. Rebecca coordinated most of the paperwork, he admitted. I was traveling a lot back then. She said she would handle it. Of course she did. I let that settle between us. Rebecca did not deny it. She simply crossed her arms loosely, her posture still relaxed, but her eyes sharper now, watching me closely as if trying to measure how much I understood. I thought back to that time in my life. Daniel had just started his company. Everything was new, fast, exciting for him. He called less often. When he did, Rebecca was usually in the background, reminding him of meetings, schedules, responsibilities. I told myself she was helping him succeed. I told myself that was what good partners did. I never once questioned where that left me. So you trusted her? I said quietly. Yes, he replied, without thinking. The word hung there, simple and heavy. Trusted. I nodded slowly, as if that explained everything. And in a way it did. Trust is a strange thing. You do not notice it when it is there. You only feel the absence of it when something goes wrong. I looked back at the phone in his hand, at the name that did not belong to me, at the years of my life that had unfolded under a completely different set of assumptions. Ethan, I said, almost to myself. He always seemed to be doing well. Daniel frowned. What do you mean? I leaned back slightly, folding my arms now, mirroring Rebecca without even realizing it. New car before he finished school. Private tuition fully paid. Trips every summer. I thought your aunt had some hidden savings I did not know about. Rebecca let out a small, controlled laugh. Ethan worked hard, she said. He deserved opportunities. I turned my head and met her gaze directly. So did I. The words were not loud. They did not need to be. For the first time, something in her expression shifted, just slightly. Not guilt. Not yet. But something closer to recognition. Daniel looked between us, confusion deepening on his face. Are you saying, he started, but did not finish the sentence. I did not help him. I did not fill in the blanks for him the way I had done so many times before, smoothing things over, making everything easier for everyone else. This time, I let him sit with it. Let him connect the pieces himself. Because some realizations need space. And some truths are louder when no one rushes to soften them. I watched Daniel's face as the realization began to take shape, slow and uneven, like something he did not want to fully see. His eyes moved back to the screen, scanning the numbers again, then back to Rebecca, searching for something that would make this simpler, something that would let him step away from the conclusion forming right in front of him. "This does not make sense," he said under his breath. "Why would it go to Ethan?" Rebecca exhaled softly, the sound almost rehearsed, like she had been preparing for this moment long before it arrived. "Because your aunt was struggling back then," she said. "You remember that. They needed help. We made a decision as a family." I tilted my head slightly. "We?" I asked. The word lingered, light but precise. Rebecca did not miss it. "You were going through a lot at the time," she continued, ignoring my question just enough to redirect it. "We did not want to burden you with more stress." Burden. I let that word settle the same way I had let all the others settle. It was always interesting, the way people chose their words when they thought they were protecting themselves. "I see," I said quietly. "So instead of telling me, you decided for me." Daniel looked up quickly. "Mom, that is not what she means." "Then what does she mean?" I asked, still calm, still steady. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Again, because there was no version of this that sounded better when spoken out loud. I could see it in the way his shoulders tightened, in the way his confidence slipped just enough to reveal something underneath it. Doubt. I leaned forward slightly, resting my hands on the table. The surface was smooth, polished, expensive. Not the kind of table I had ever owned. 12 years ago, I said, my voice even, almost reflective. "I remember calling you one night because my heater stopped working. Do you remember that?" Daniel frowned, trying to place it. I think so. You told me you would send something to help." I continued. "You said you had already set money aside for me, that I should not worry." His expression shifted again, something heavier this time. "Yes," he said slowly. "I remember that." I nodded once. "I waited for that money," I said. "I waited a long time." Rebecca shifted her weight again, her composure still intact, but no longer effortless. "Margaret, that was years ago," she said. "We cannot go back and change." "No." I interrupted gently, not raising my voice, just enough to stop her. "We cannot." The room fell quiet again, but this silence felt different. Sharper, more defined. I sat back in my chair, letting my gaze move from Daniel to Rebecca and back again. For years, I had filled in the gaps for them, explained things away, accepted less than I deserved because it was easier than asking difficult questions. But now the answers were right here, laid out in numbers and names and carefully chosen words. And for the first time, I did not feel the need to rush past them. I simply let them exist, let them speak for themselves. "So tell me," I said after a moment, my voice soft but steady, "when exactly did you decide that I did not deserve to know?" Daniel did not answer me right away. He looked down at his hands, then back at the table, as if the answer might be written somewhere between the wood grain and the silence we were all sitting in. Rebecca, however, did not look away this time. She met my gaze directly, her posture straightening just slightly, like someone who had decided there was no point in pretending anymore. "It was not like that," she said, her voice calm, measured, carefully balanced. "We made the best decision we could with the information we had at the time." I let out a slow breath, not out of frustration, but out of recognition. That tone, that phrasing, I had heard it before in different forms, in different situations, always wrapped in the same quiet confidence that made it sound reasonable, even when it was not. "The best decision for who?" I asked. She did not hesitate this time. "For the family." I nodded slowly, as if considering that answer. "I see," I said. "And I was not part of that family." Daniel shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Mom, of course you are," he said quickly. "That is not what she means." "Then explain it to me." I replied, still calm, still steady. "Help me understand how money that was meant for me became something I was never even told about." He ran a hand through his hair, the way he used to when he was younger and overwhelmed. "I trusted that everything was handled," he said. "I thought you knew. I thought it had already been taken care of." I watched him closely, listening not just to what he said, but to what he did not. There was no anger in his voice, no defensiveness, just confusion, and something else, something quieter. Regret, maybe, but regret does not change the past. It just makes it heavier to carry. "You thought I knew," I repeated softly. "So you never asked." He did not respond to that, because there was no response that would make it better. Rebecca stepped forward slightly, closing the distance just enough to reassert her presence in the conversation. "Margaret, You have to understand, she said, her tone softening now, shifting into something almost sympathetic. Back then, Ethan had opportunities that needed immediate support. Scholarships, housing, tuition deadlines. The timing was critical. You were stable. I almost smiled again. Stable. That was the word she chose. Not struggling. Not surviving. Not working myself to exhaustion just to keep the lights on. Stable. I was invisible, I said quietly. The words landed in the space between us, simple and unembellished. Rebecca's expression flickered, just for a second, before settling again. Daniel looked up at me, something in his eyes shifting more clearly now. Mom, he started, but I raised my hand gently, not to silence him, but to pause the moment. I did not need apologies. Not yet. Apologies come easily when people are faced with consequences. What mattered to me was understanding how this had been allowed to happen in the first place. You made a decision, I said, looking at both of them now. You redirected something that was meant for me, and you did it without telling me. You let me live my life believing there was nothing there. I paused, letting that truth settle fully before continuing. And for 12 years, not once did either of you think to check if I had ever received it. The silence that followed was no longer uncertain. It was clear, defined. There were no more missing pieces, no more assumptions left to question. Only the truth, sitting plainly in front of us. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt something shift inside me. Not pain, not anger, something colder, something steadier. The kind of clarity that does not ask for explanations anymore. The kind that begins to plan what comes next. I did not speak right away. I let the silence stretch again, but this time it felt different, like something had already settled into place, and there was no need to rush what came next. Daniel shifted in his seat, his fingers tapping lightly against the edge of the table, a nervous habit he had never quite grown out of. Rebecca, on the other hand, stood still, watching me with a kind of quiet calculation, as if she was trying to anticipate my next move before I made it. I had spent years reacting to situations as they came, adjusting, adapting, making space for everyone else. But this moment did not call for reaction. It called for patience. I think I would like copies of those records, I said finally, my voice calm, almost casual. Daniel looked up, surprised. What do you mean? The transfers, I said. The documents. All of it. I would like to see everything clearly. Rebecca's expression changed again, just slightly, the smallest tightening around her eyes. Margaret, that really is not necessary, she said gently. We already know what happened. I turned my head toward her, not sharply, just enough to meet her gaze. Yes, I said. I believe we do, but I would still like to see it for myself. Daniel nodded quickly, almost relieved to have something concrete to do. Of course, he said. I can send everything over tonight. I gave a small nod in return. Thank you. The conversation should have ended there. In another time, it would have. I would have accepted the explanation, folded the moment away, and found a way to move forward without making anyone uncomfortable. But something inside me had changed, and I could feel it clearly now. It was not loud. It was not emotional. It was steady. I stood up slowly, smoothing my hands over the front of my coat. I should get going, I said. Daniel looked confused. Already? Yes, I replied. I have a few things I need to take care of. Rebecca stepped forward slightly, her voice soft again, almost warm. Margaret, there is no need to rush off like this. We can talk through this together. I paused for a moment, considering her words, then gave a small, polite smile. We already have, I said. There was nothing sharp in my tone, nothing accusatory. Just a simple statement of fact. I reached for my bag, feeling its familiar weight in my hand. For years, that weight had represented everything I carried on my own. Bills, receipts, small reminders of a life built piece by piece. Today, it felt different. Lighter, somehow, even though nothing inside it had changed. I will be in touch, I added, glancing briefly at Daniel. He nodded again, still trying to process everything that had just unfolded. Rebecca did not respond this time. She only watched me, her expression unreadable now, the confidence from earlier replaced with something more cautious. I walked toward the door without looking back. Each step felt deliberate, measured. Outside, the air was cooler than I expected, the kind that wakes you up a little, sharp but not unpleasant. I stood there for a moment, letting it settle around me. 12 years. 12 years of believing one version of my life, when another had been quietly written without me. I could feel the weight of that realization, but it did not overwhelm me. It clarified things, simplified them. I took a slow breath and reached into my bag, pulling out my phone. There were a few calls I needed to make. Not out of anger, not out of revenge, but because, for the first time in a very long time, I was no longer willing to leave my life in someone else's hands. I did not call anyone right away. Instead, I went home. The same small place I had lived in for years, the one that always felt just a little too quiet at night. I set my bag down on the kitchen table and stood there for a moment, looking at the surface worn smooth by time, by routine, by a life built carefully around limitations I had never questioned. Then I sat down and waited. Not for them. For myself. It did not take long. The feeling came back, the same steady clarity I had felt outside their house. Not anger. Not sadness. Just focus. My phone buzzed softly against the table. An email. Daniel. He had sent everything, just like he said he would. Files, statements, confirmations. I opened them slowly, one by one, not rushing, not skipping ahead. Dates lined up in neat columns. Transfers marked clearly. Signatures at the bottom of scanned documents. I noticed something immediately. My name was there, but not in the way it should have been. Not as the recipient. As a reference. A justification. The account holder was listed differently. Ethan Parker. I leaned back slightly, letting that sink in again, this time without the distraction of voices around me. The details were precise. Too precise to be a mistake. There were authorization forms, digital approvals, and one name appeared more than any other. Rebecca Collins. I did not react. I simply kept reading. Every page told the same story, just in different ways. The money had been moved in stages, carefully, deliberately, each step documented, each decision signed off. There was no confusion here. No accident. Just a plan that had been executed quietly, over time, without interruption. I closed the last file and placed my phone back on the table. The room was still. The kind of stillness that lets you hear your own thoughts clearly, without interference. For years, I had believed that what I had was all there was. That my life had been shaped by circumstance, by limitation, by things outside my control. But now I could see something else. Not everything had been out of my hands. Some things had simply been taken from them before I even knew to hold on. I stood up and walked over to the small cabinet by the window. Inside, I kept old papers, bills, receipts, letters, things I had never thrown away, even when I thought they no longer mattered. I opened it and began to sort through them, slowly, methodically. Old bank statements, employment records, notes I had written to myself years ago, reminders of things I needed to pay, things I needed to fix. I found the notebook I used back then, the one where I tracked every expense down to the dollar. I flipped through the pages, stopping at the entries from 12 years ago. There it was. The same winter. The same weeks I had struggled to keep everything together. I traced my finger along the numbers I had written in careful handwriting. Rent. Utilities. Groceries. Every line told a story I remembered too well. And in between those lines, there was something else now. An absence that should not have been there. I closed the notebook gently and set it aside. Then I reached for my phone again. This time, I did not hesitate. I searched for a number I had not called in years. When it appeared on the screen, I paused for just a second, then pressed call. The line rang twice before a familiar voice answered, older now, but still recognizable. Hello. I did not introduce myself right away. I did not need to. Ethan, I said quietly. We need to talk. There was a pause on the other end of the line, just long enough for me to hear him breathe in before answering. Aunt Margaret. Ethan's voice carried surprise, but not confusion. He knew exactly who I was. It has been a while, he added, a little too quickly, as if trying to fill the silence before I could say anything else. It has, I replied. My tone stayed even, steady, the same way it had been all day. I did not give him anything more than that. Not yet. Is everything okay? He asked. I could hear movement in the background, the faint sound of a door closing, his voice lowering slightly, as if he had stepped into a quieter space. I took a moment before answering, letting the weight of the question settle. That depends, I said. I was reviewing some financial records today, from about 12 years ago. Another pause. Longer this time. I could almost picture him, standing still, processing the direction of the conversation, deciding how much. He wanted to say, "Okay," he said slowly. And I did not rush him. "Your name came up," I continued. "More than once." The line went quiet again. No background noise this time. Just silence. I let it stretch, just like I had done earlier. Because silence has a way of asking questions people do not want to answer. "I do not understand," he finally said. But there was a hesitation beneath the words, a carefulness that did not match the sentence. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, not out of frustration, but to center myself. "I think you do," I said gently. "The account, the transfers, the authorization forms, they all point to you." He exhaled slowly, and this time there was no attempt to hide it. I did not handle any of that directly," he said. "My mom and Rebecca were the ones who set everything up. I was just told it was part of a family arrangement." A family arrangement. I repeated the phrase silently in my mind. It sounded so simple when said like that. So harmless. "And you never asked where the money came from?" I asked. "I assumed," he started, then stopped. "I assumed it was from savings. Or investments." I did not question it. Of course he did not. Why would he? When something benefits you, it is easy not to look too closely at how it arrived. "Ethan," I said, my voice still calm, still measured, "that money was meant for me." The words landed clearly, without accusation, without emotion. Just truth. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "What?" he said, the word coming out before he could stop it. This time, the surprise sounded real. That is not what I was told." I nodded slightly, even though he could not see me. "I believe that," I said. And I did. Because this was never just one person's decision. It was something that had been built quietly, step by step, each person accepting just enough of the story to keep it moving forward. "I did not know," he said again, softer now. "If I had known." He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. I had heard enough unfinished sentences in my life to understand what they meant. I looked down at the table, at the small scratches, and marks that had been there for years, unnoticed until now. "We are going to need to go over everything," I said. "Every detail. Every transfer. I want to understand exactly how this happened." There was no hesitation this time. "Yes," he said quickly. "Of course. Whatever you need." I opened my eyes and stared ahead, my reflection faintly visible in the dark window across the room. For the first time since this started, I could see the full shape of it. Not just the loss, not just the betrayal, but the structure behind it. And once you see the structure, you begin to understand how to take it apart. Over the next few days, I did not rush anything. I let the information come to me piece by piece, the way it should have been done from the beginning. Ethan sent over what he had, statements, emails, confirmations he had kept without thinking they would ever matter. I compared them carefully with what Daniel had given me, laying everything out across my kitchen table like a quiet investigation no one else could see. Patterns began to form. Dates aligned too perfectly. Decisions were made too quickly, and one detail stood out more than the rest. Every major step had Rebecca's involvement, not just in coordination, but in authorization. She had not just managed the process. She had controlled it. I sat back and looked at everything in front of me, the full picture finally clear. It was never a misunderstanding. It was never about urgency or helping someone else in need. It was a decision, a deliberate one, and for 12 years, it had remained untouched because no one had challenged it. My phone rang later that evening. "Daniel." I let it ring once, twice, then answered. "Mom," he said, his voice quieter than usual, stripped of the confidence I had heard just days ago. "I have been going through everything. I did not know. I swear to you, I did not know." I believed him, not because he said it, but because I had already seen the way he operated. He trusted easily. Too easily. "I know," I replied. There was a pause, then a shift in his tone. "Rebecca and I talked," he continued. "She said it was complicated back then, that there were reasons. But the more I look at it, the less it makes sense." I did not respond right away. I let him reach that conclusion on his own. It mattered more that way. "Mom," he said again, this time more carefully, "we want to fix this." I looked down at the papers in front of me, at the years they represented. Years I could not get back. Years I had lived differently because of a choice I was never allowed to make. "Fix it," I repeated softly. The words felt distant, like they belonged to someone else. "Yes," he said quickly. "We can transfer it back. We can make things right." I closed my eyes for a brief moment, not out of emotion, but out of clarity. Because this was the moment everything turned. Not when I discovered the truth. Not when I connected the pieces. But now, when they realized I no longer needed anything from them. Daniel, I said, my voice calm, steady, unchanged, that money is not what I am concerned about anymore. He went quiet. It is not, he asked. No, I said. What matters is that for 12 years, I lived a life based on something that was not true. And no one thought I deserved to know. I could hear him breathing on the other end, slower now, heavier. I am sorry, he said. I really am. I believe that too. But belief did not change what had already happened. I opened my eyes and looked out the window, at the streetlights casting long shadows across the pavement. Everything looked the same as it always had. But it was not. There are things I need to do, I continued. People I need to speak with. This is not just about moving money from one account to another. What do you mean, he asked. I did not answer right away. Because the truth was, this was only the beginning. For the first time, I was not reacting to what had been done. I was deciding what would happen next. And that was something they had never expected.